Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 4 of X Factor From the Ashes, written by Mark Russell. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. So with that said, this issue opens at the X Factor house, with the team undertaking a group meeting. And the first thing on the agenda that Havoc had to address was how Zyber was going to be out for a while, so they were bringing in a temporary replacement, which was a teleportation mutant. And the second thing they had to address was how the higher-ups wanted Cecilia to change her codename to something that could resonate with the 18 to 25-year-old demographic. Now this pissed Cecilia off, but Pyro didn't want to hear it because the same higher-ups had Pyro undertake a face tattoo removal. And the last thing they needed to address was their upcoming mission to rescue some scientists. This right here was right up Frenzy's alley because after their previous mission to space, rescuing some scientists seemed like a softball mission. But that happiness was short-lived as Havoc revealed the scientist was located in the center of the Earth. So, with everything ready to go and the mission explained, Havoc and the team started to make their way down the hallway, as Havoc continued to inform everyone that every second counted and the scientists' lives were at stake, and it was up to them to save the day. With that said, as they walked, Frenzy couldn't help but ask about the location of the newest member of their team, to which Havoc replied by saying he was going to meet up with them at the launch site. So, with that out of the way, Havoc then turned to Granny and told her that he wanted her to sit this mission out, due to her abilities. Because if they were to get stuck in a cave-in, then Granny would be trapped down there forever, due to her being unable to die. Following that, the team took their private jet and landed in New Mexico, and upon exiting the craft, Havoc stood before Dr. Lucy, the person who was in charge of the Ori, the lost science vessel. Following that, Dr. Lucy went on to say that this was not nearly enough time to prepare their crew for a mission of this complexity, so they had to pay attention closely. Then she continued on to say, as they may know, the Earth's mantle is not completely solid, for there are subterranean caverns, pockets hollowed out by ancient flows of magma. And in these pockets, they sent a team of 2 scientists down the superboard toward the Earth's core, but they believe their vessel was lost in one of those caverns. But luckily for them, they had a backup vessel with which to retrieve them. However, regardless of the details of the mission, Havoc was only concerned with whether the caverns had decent lighting, for part of their jobs was to record videos for Marvel's version of TikTok. On a side note, when Havoc brought up the light situation, the doctor instantly tensed up, stated that he was determined to die, and immediately took off. So with everything ago, the team started to make their way into the vessel, and as they entered, Cecilia brought up how she was so happy that the cavern potentially had bad cell phone service. But little did she know, the person she was trying to avoid was the same person who was going to accompany them on their mission, for Oscary was already on the vessel. And as soon as Cecilia saw him, she instantly tried to exit the vessel, but it was too late. And despite her protest, the mission kicked off like scheduled, and the vessel dropped into the ground with crazy speed. And as they descended, Oscary tried his best to explain why he was currently there. But see, that wasn't enough, for Cecilia wanted to know why she was ghosted, she wanted to know why everyone at their favorite bar had seen her sobbing, and she wanted to know why he never introduced her to his parents or friends. So until she received those answers, Cecilia wanted nothing to do with Oscary. So as the ex-couple continued to argue, on the next page, we see Havoc trying his best to stop the vessel from meeting a terrible end, as they stop mere inches away from crashing into a hole in the ground. With the team just being moments away from death, Havoc couldn't help but to say, he thinks he knows where the Ori vessel derailed. Following that, Havoc quickly went into the room where all his team members were in, and continued to say, we don't know what they are dealing with here, so Frenzy and Pyro are going to be with him. And as for Cecilia and Oscar, Havoc ordered them to set up a medical bay in case of emergencies. As for communication purposes, Havoc also told Oscar that they are out of range for communications with HQ, so if anything goes wrong, he wants him to teleport to the surface. Now, following the marching orders being given, Havoc stated that he and his squad should be back before their oxygen ran out. So, with that said, we get a narration saying, nothing reminds you of how little this world wants them here, quite like going deep underground, for it's thousands of degrees centigrade, which means there's no breathable air and no water. So in a world this hostile to your survival, everything you need you'd better bring with you, which was exactly what they did, because before they stepped foot in the cave, they deployed an atmospheric bomb to prep the space. With that done, the team started to walk within the lava chamber. And upon first glance, Havoc noticed that there was no sign of the Ori in the parts of the cavern illuminated by the lava flow, so of course they had to look elsewhere, which raised its own questions. And chief among them was, where exactly did it go, and more importantly, how? Now with panic setting in, the team continued their journey, as we transitioned back to their vessel with Oscar and Cecilia continuing their conversation. And one of the first things we hear him say is that he is not trying to win her back, because he knows that ship has sailed. But he was hoping she'd let him talk because he made a terrible mistake. Now these terrible mistakes he made were before he even met her, and he knows they don't give out medals for doing the right thing, but that is what he is trying to do. And it is true that he never introduced Cecilia to his family and friends. And it is also true that he even denied having a girlfriend and would also disappear without saying a single word. But see, he did those things for a reason he couldn't tell her, because if he did, he knew he would lose her forever. Now following that, we jump back a few months earlier to the headquarters of X-Term, and once we got there, Oscar stated, after the fall of Krakoa, he was aimless and was looking for a place to belong, but instead one found him. And almost instantly, Oscar knew he made a deal with the devil, but what else could he have done when the devil was the only one who was hiring? For Darkstar welcomed Oscar to the island and started to tell him a little about the vision of their future. Because Charles thought they could live in peace with the human world, and Magneto thought they could live separate from it. But both were wrong, for there is only one way for their kind to live in peace with the human world, and that is to rule it. Now to that, Oscar replied by saying, they aren't ruling them, but rather fighting their wars for them, to which Darkstar replied by saying, human nation-states were created for the very purpose of waging wars and destroying each other. So if you want into their world, then this would be the front door. And Oscar's job for the devil was not what he expected, because when he worked for X-Term, he killed a lot of people. One of his targets was a military base that he was supposed to deliver an explosive to. Now this device was already set with 3 seconds on the clock. So all he had to do was teleport in and then get out. But when the day came, Oscar realized, no matter how loyal you are, or how indispensable you imagine yourself to be, you will never really work for the devil, because you're simply there to be consumed by it. And at that moment, Oscar realized his target was not what he expected it to be. And on that day was when Oscar left X-Term, but there was only one problem: no one is ever allowed to quit. So 3 days later, Oscar found out that his parents had been murdered, and at that point, Oscar knew that everyone close to him, everyone he loved, was now at risk. Now this was the reason why Oscar couldn't tell anyone about her, because he knew that he loved her. So if X-Term ever learned of it, then she would be next on its list. Following that explanation of Oscar's story, we then transitioned back to Havoc and Pyro finding the remains of the Ori vessel and much more. For an automated drill team had laid tracks designed to allow the Ori to traverse the pockets of the caverns. But the reason the Ori vessel derailed was because these giant spider creatures had eaten the tracks due to the fact that they consume metal, but that wasn't it, because they also found the missing scientist, just in time to die with them. So with the mystery exposed, we then jump back over to Oscar's and Cecilia's conversation. And after Oscar broke everything down, he then went on to say, if he told her everything, then that would mean he would have had to tell her about what he'd done. To which Cecilia replied by saying, she understands, but that should have been her choice, not his. Now with the air clear between the two, Oscar then went on to say, he knows it sounds stupid, but he imagined that if he joined X Factor, then maybe they could start over, and maybe within X Factor they could remain safe. Now this couldn't have been further from the truth, for the giant spiders from outside was heading right for them. So as Cecilia and Oscar sat within the spiders' happy meal, we then jumped back to Pyro, Havoc and Frenzy putting in work on the spiders. And as they fought to keep the enemies at bay, Havoc kept repeatedly calling Cecilia to inform them of the current updates in the mission, but due to their heart-to-heart moment, his calls fell on deaf ears. And right when Oscar and Cecilia came to the apex of their conversation, Havoc was able to get his message through just in time for all hell to break loose. Because just as he said that there are creatures in the cavern that are attracted to reflective surfaces and eat metal, a giant spider head broke through the hull of the vessel. Now this is the worst thing that could have happened, because their vessel, the Nemeto, was their only way home. So with yet another fight on, Cecilia tried her best to hold the creatures at bay, by deploying her shield around Oscar and herself just in time to reflex an attack from one of the creatures. So with things looking dire, Cecilia tells Oscar to get out of there, and head to the surface and bring back help. But instead of doing that, Oscar teleported behind the vessel to draw the monster's attention, for he was not about to abandon Cecilia again. And in a burst of courage he yelled for the spiders to come and get him. which was exactly what they did as they rushed his location. And right before the spiders could attack him, Havoc and the rest of the team showed up and blasted them out of the way. So with Oscar out cold, Havoc pointed out that the atmosphere control bomb was wearing off, so they had to get back to the vessel before it was too late. And to make things worse, outside the temperatures was now over 1,000 degrees, which means they would never be able to make it back to the surface with a gaping hole in their ship. So with options running low, Havoc then had an idea that maybe Pyro can channel his flames into a welding arc. For a while, it seemed like they were dead and buried, which sounds so final. But speaking as someone who was recently both, Havoc could assure them they are not. Not when so much of the world is dead in plain sight. And so much of what they bury was never really dead. So with the day saved and the team heading back to the surface, Cecilia sat beside Oscar as he laid in recovery. And at the end of the comic, Oscar called Cecilia by her new codename, Florence Nightingale, and gave her a kiss. So with that said, this issue comes to an end. But anyway, down in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.